I thought I was alone after losing my mom, but then a total stranger saw my ring. Amelia wore a ring, a keepsake from her mother, to a job interview, but little did she know, the interviewer had a matching one. That simple connection led to an unbelievable discovery that would change her life forever. Hi everyone, welcome to Tales Unveiled. Today, I'm excited to share a brand new story with you. Let's get started. Amelia's stomach churned with nerves as she prepared for the job interview at a thriving construction company across town. This wasn't just about landing a position. It was about survival. It was about finding a foothold after the world had been knocked out from under her by her mother's passing. Excitement battled with a familiar pang of loss, reminding her that nothing would ever bring her mother back. Still, with her father's quiet strength beside her, she pressed on, determined to build a future worthy of the woman who had shaped her. On the morning of the interview, Amelia looked up at the overcast sky, almost as though seeking a sign. The world felt a little less vibrant without her mom. Instead of dwelling on the sadness, she straightened her shoulders, remembering the lessons her mother had taught her, resilience, the quiet strength found in hard work. These memories propelled her forward, believing that each step she took was a tribute to the woman who had brought her into the world. Amelia had woken up extra early that day. Every detail of her appearance had to be just right. She chose to wear the navy suit her mother had expertly sewn for her, simple but impeccably tailored. It was far from fancy, but it held a deeper kind of value, imbued with the warmth of her mother's hands. The position she aimed for was as an office assistant to Mr. Reynolds, the no-nonsense foreman known throughout the company for his efficiency and exacting standards. The job wasn't glamorous, but it promised the stability and structure Amelia craved. Being part of Mr. Reynolds' team was a step toward the responsible, self-sufficient life she desired. Amelia grabbed her bag and headed out. Before leaving, her eyes lingered on the photo of her mother propped up on the side table. Sadness tightened her chest. Her eyes fell to her hand, where a distinctive, well-worn ring rested, one that had belonged to her mother. It was a reminder of family ties. She never fully understood the inscription inside. Where there's hope. The phrase had always given her a sense of quiet strength. In the waiting room, Amelia found herself surrounded by unfamiliar faces. The other candidates carried themselves with an air of practiced confidence, portfolios tucked under their arms. Amelia suddenly felt out of place. Everyone seemed to have more experience, a better grasp of the industry jargon that echoed around her. Self-doubt crept in, and an unexpected giggle bubbled up. Laughter in the serious space felt wildly inappropriate. As the sound escaped her lips, head swiveled toward her. Embarrassment burned through her, and she hastily buried her face in a company brochure, trying to regain her composure. Her anxiety only increased as one by one, the candidates disappeared behind the heavy door. Each time it swung open, she'd catch a glimpse of the office. The air was thick with formality. The mystery of what happened behind that door only intensified her nervousness. Finally, her name was called. Amelia's legs nearly buckled, but she took a steadying breath and smoothed down the wrinkle-free fabric of her mother's suit, seeking its familiar comfort. Mr. Reynolds' office was a cramped space at the back of a construction trailer. Blueprints spilled over his desk, and a worn hard hat hung from the back of his chair. He extended his hand in greeting, and Amelia shook it firmly, masking her surprise at the roughness of his callous hand. As the interview began, her initial tension eased slightly. Mr. Reynolds was direct but fair, and Amelia's honesty seemed to win her points. She talked about her eagerness to learn the ropes, her willingness to start from the bottom, and her strong work ethic. Though she couldn't bluff her way through fancy construction lingo, her sincerity made her stand out from those who tried. The interview was nearing its end when Mr. Reynolds, a man not known for sentimentality, paused. He seemed to be studying her hands. "That ring," he began slowly. "It looks familiar. Where did you get it?" Caught off guard, Amelia explained, "It was my mother's. She always wore it." She trailed off, unsure how much to reveal. Mr. Reynolds leaned forward. "Mind if I see it closer?" Amelia hesitated, then slipped off the ring and handed it to him. He turned it over in his weathered hand, his expression shifting from surprise to disbelief. Then, from his own pocket, Mr. Reynolds pulled out a worn ring, nearly identical to Amelia's. On the inside, etched in the same distinctive script, was a phrase, "There's always light." With trembling hands, he joined the two rings, and the inscription, "Where there's hope, there's always light," clicked seamlessly into place. In that moment, the air between them crackled with a realization almost too profound for words. "My father had these made," Mr. Reynolds began, his voice thick. "One for me and one for my sister." A mix of shock and understanding washed over Amelia. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Your sister?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mr. Reynolds nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "My sister was your mother." The revelation hit Amelia like a wave, washing away years of unspoken questions and a longing for something she didn't even know she was missing. Suddenly, the ring on her finger felt heavier with the weight of family history she was only now beginning to grasp. Mr. Reynolds, not one for emotional displays, blinked back tears as he shared stories of his sister, the young woman whose spirit Amelia had unknowingly embodied. His voice cracked with a mix of joy and regret as he spoke of finding his niece, but years too late to reconnect with the sister he had lost. He explained how tragic circumstances had shaken his family, leaving the siblings orphaned without support. The records from those times were muddled, and he and his sister had been sent to separate foster homes. Despite his relentless efforts over the years, his search for her had always proved fruitless. The documents had been lost in bureaucratic tangles, making reconnection seem impossible. Amelia listened intently. She, in turn, shared memories of her mother, her quiet strength, her skill as a seamstress, and the love she had for the daughter she raised. Pictures on her phone brought those stories to life. With each image, Mr. Reynolds' eyes lit up, recognizing his lost sister in the smile and spirit of his niece. The shared inscription on their rings, once a source of quiet solace, now held a power neither of them could have foreseen. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind. The job interview faded into the background. What mattered now was the unexpected, life-altering discovery of family. Uncle and niece spent hours poring over photographs, bridging the gap between the past and the present. There was a shared sense of mourning for lost opportunities, but woven through it all was a profound joy of a connection found. Mr. Reynolds insisted on sharing stories of his own life. He spoke fondly of his wife, the bedrock of his world, and the two children they raised. He pulled out his phone, eyes sparkling with pride, and showed Amelia pictures of his sons. With a mix of gruffness and deep affection, he told her about their exploits. In that moment, the possibility of cousins, of belonging to a larger, boisterous family, filled Amelia with a sense of hope that transcended her recent loss. "They'd love you," Mr. Reynolds said simply, a statement that made her heart swell. Over the following weeks, as Amelia settled into her new job and developed a blossoming relationship with Mr. Reynolds, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was meant to be. The rings, passed down from her grandfather, once symbols of an unknown longing, had led her toward a family she never knew existed. They were a reminder that even amidst the twists and turns of life, extraordinary gifts could be found, if you only knew where to look. And for Amelia, amidst a world that suddenly felt less lonely, the rings on their fingers whispered a promise. Where there's hope, there's always light. Amelia couldn't stop thinking about the events that had unfolded. Each time she looked at the ring on her finger, it felt heavier with meaning, as if it carried not just her mother's memory, but the weight of an entire family history that had remained hidden for decades. She had never imagined that a simple piece of jewelry, something that had always comforted her, would lead her to discover her long-lost uncle. It felt like a chapter of her life that had been written for her before she even knew she was a part of the story. Despite the whirlwind of emotions, Amelia was determined to carry on. She immersed herself in her new role at the construction company, finding comfort in the routine and the structure. Mr. Reynolds, though stern and no-nonsense, had become more than just a boss. He was a family member, a connection that anchored her in ways she hadn't anticipated. Every day, Amelia looked forward to their conversations, where they would share stories about her mother and the family they never knew they had. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, Amelia sat at her small kitchen table with her father. He had always been a quiet man, but the sadness in his eyes had softened over the past few weeks. Since Amelia's discovery, they had spent more time together, revisiting old memories and slowly rebuilding the pieces of their lives. As they sat there, Amelia's father spoke up. "I always knew there was something missing, something we didn't know," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother never spoke much about her past, but I could always sense there was a family she had lost. She was always so strong, never asking for help, always pushing forward, but I think she carried that weight with her every day." Amelia nodded, her own emotions swelling as she remembered her mother's quiet strength. She could see it now in her father's words. Her mother had never been one to complain. She had carried the pain of loss in silence, just as she had carried her family's history in the form of that simple ring. "I'm glad you found him," her father continued, his voice steady but filled with affection. "I know your mom would have been happy to know that you have family. Real family." The warmth in her father's words filled Amelia's heart. It wasn't just a discovery of her uncle that had changed her life. It was a healing of old wounds, the reconciliation of a past she hadn't known she was missing. In finding Mr. Reynolds, she had unknowingly begun to heal the scars of her own family, stitching together a new tapestry with threads that had been torn apart long ago. In the weeks that followed, Amelia and Mr. Reynolds spent more time together. She visited his home, meeting his wife and children. They welcomed her with open arms, their home buzzing with laughter and conversation. For the first time since her mother's death, Amelia felt a sense of belonging, as if she had found a place where she was truly wanted. Amelia's connection with her uncle deepened, and with each passing day, the weight of her grief lifted just a little more. She began to embrace her new life, knowing that her journey was not defined by the loss she had endured, but by the new beginnings that had sprouted from the most unlikely places. The rings, once just a symbol of loss, now represented the strength and resilience of a family that had never truly been lost, just waiting to be found. One day, as Amelia sat with Mr. Reynolds in his office, discussing an upcoming project, he casually mentioned, "You know, I've been thinking, you should come by for Thanksgiving this year. It's about time we celebrate like a family." Amelia's heart swelled with emotion. Thanksgiving had always been a time for reflection, but now it would be a time for celebration. A celebration of family, of rediscovered connections, and of hope. Hope that had always been there, waiting for the right moment to shine. Thanksgiving arrived, and Amelia found herself standing in the doorway of Mr. Reynolds' home, taking in the warm glow of the lights that illuminated the front porch. The scent of roasted turkey and homemade pies drifted through the air, mixing with the sound of laughter and voices inside. She could hardly believe how far she had come in such a short amount of time. As she stepped inside, she was greeted by Mr. Reynolds' wife, who wrapped her in a hug. "We're so glad you're here," she said, her voice filled with warmth. "Come on in. The kids are eager to meet you." The house was filled with family. Children ran through the halls, their laughter infectious, while adults gathered around the table, sharing stories and enjoying each other's company. Amelia's heart was full as she looked around, taking in the faces of people she had only just met, but who already felt like family. She had never imagined that this day would come, that she would be standing in the midst of such love and connection. As the meal began, Mr. Reynolds stood up, raising a glass. "To family," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "To the ties that bind us, even when we don't know they're there. Amelia, we're so glad to have you with us. You're not just a part of the family now, you've always been." Tears welled up in Amelia's eyes as she looked around the table, her heart swelling with gratitude. She thought back to the early days after her mother's passing when she had felt so alone. Now, surrounded by family, she realized that the journey she had taken wasn't just about finding a job, but about finding her place in the world again. And in that moment, she understood that the rings, those simple, worn rings, had not only led her to family, but had brought light to the darkest corners of her life. As the evening wore on, Amelia knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with the warmth of family, the strength of her mother's legacy, and the promise of hope that would continue to light her path. Thank you all for joining us for today's story. If you enjoyed it, please tap that like button subscribe to the channel, and let us know how this story made you feel in a single word in the comments. And while you're at it, check out the video currently on your screen. See you next time.